If there ever is a settlement on Mars, I'm sure that one of the first things they'll open up is a coffee house.
It's one of the most complex beverages on Earth.
$2 for a cup of coffee. 1 cent goes to the coffee grower.
It's mountain grown.
Coffee is the second most valuable legal traded commodity on the face of the earth, after oil.
E preto pela cor do negro que deu toda essa riqueza para o seu patrão, né?
It's just this little seed and has this enormous political, social, and economic impact on human beings.
This is the epic story of a beverage that shares its birthplace with our earliest human ancestors. In this hour, we see how the mass marketing of cheap coffee impacts those who drink it and grow it, and why for millions of men, women, and children, the golden bean has always made a wicked brew. For over a century, coffee prices have been spiraling upward and downward in wild cycles of boom and bust. This has created extravagant wealth for some and needless misery for many. At the outset of the 21st century, a lack of international regulations has left the world awash in more coffee than we can consume, pushing the price of green beans to the lowest level ever. One of the countries most affected is the world's coffee giant, Brazil.
Since the coffee market was deregulated in the early 90s, many changes have occurred in the industry in Brazil. There was a period of great difficulty for Brazilian markets because we would have very low prices like we are having now. Brazilian farmers fought harder to adapt, to produce in a more competitive way, reducing their costs.
Coffee production has gone industrial in Brazil, with cheap beans grown in huge volume. Specialists like George Howell are trying to boost prices by finding a better quality Brazilian coffee, which will command a higher price from the roasters. The search is on at the Cup of Excellence.
Cup of Excellence grew out of a project that I had been hired for by the United Nations to help producers make a higher quality product and then to sell it for higher prices.
Number 1, 90 and up.
Yeah, baby.
The idea here is to develop relationships between consumers and producers. The producer gets the full result by getting the full price of the internet auction, which really gets extraordinary prices for these lots.
Tasted like turtles, the peanut caramel turtles, you know? I got that over and over.
The experts become more serious as they get close to making their pick. One of this year's finalists is on the verge of losing his farm because of the low market price. Coffee is worth its weight in gold, at least for the winning beans in the winning cup. The Cup of Excellence benefits consumers who have come to take for granted a good cup of coffee at a reasonable price. But if the crisis continues, they will taste the difference, as low prices force producers to cut corners or abandon their farms. And while corporate roasters buying coffee benefit from low prices, the people dependent on growing coffee suffer the pain. Over 2 centuries earlier, coffee hasn't arrived yet in the British colonies. In 1773, tea and ale are the beverages of choice. Ironically, the story of coffee begins when the British put a tax on tea.
The colonists didn't much like the idea of this tax, and they decided to show their displeasure. A local business person and brewer, Samuel Adams, got a whole bunch of Sons of Liberty together. They boarded a British merchantman, dumped all the tea in Boston Harbor. It was a signal that the days of being colonies under Britain were ended, and the signal of which side you were on in the struggle was the difference between walking into a tavern and ordering coffee or walking into the coffee house and ordering tea.
One of the Sons of Liberty is an avid tea drinker and future president, John Adams. He writes to his wife about kicking his tea habit. Tea must be universally renounced, and I must be weaned. The sooner, the better. From this time on, it becomes a patriotic duty to avoid tea. And since coffee is being cultivated nearer to home, it's also cheaper and more accessible.
Você não consegue contar a história do Brasil sem contar a história do café. No início da colonização brasileira, você teve vários ciclos, o ciclo do pau-brasil, o ciclo da cana-do-açúcar, mas nada foi tão sólido como a cafeicultura no Brasil. O café determinou o povo brasileiro.
Do ponto de vista econômico, essa acumulação, então, vai permitir, vai exigir, vai permitir, vai incentivar todo um processo de melhoria de infraestrutura, de modernização, ferrovias, portos, sistema bancário, estrutura urbana.
Coffee creates modern Brazil, but at an enormous environmental cost.
Brazil had been a beautiful, self-sustaining place, lovely rainforests, very fecund land, no problem growing everything you needed. But then they began to cut down all the rainforests. They would burn them.
Se nós pensarmos que do que nós tínhamos, me parece que da Mata Atlântica, hoje em São Paulo, o que resta de mata nativa em São Paulo, hoje nós teríamos apenas 10%, por volta de 10%, se não me engano. E se nós olhássemos o mapa de São Paulo, sabendo que o café vai dominar toda a região.
Brazil's agricultural methods have routinely emphasized quantity over quality. When the land is depleted, planters simply abandon their farms and clear new swaths of forest. If the environmental cost is great, the human cost is even more devastating. As Americans grow fond of coffee, plantation owners bring in slaves by the shipful to do the intensive work of coffee cultivation.
Os escravos eles eram amontoados ali nos porões do navio como animais. E ali eles faziam as suas necessidades, tá? Eles tinham uma ração diária por dia, que muitas das vezes se resumia em fubá molhado para comer. E as condições desumanas pioravam mais ainda quando eles chegavam aqui no Brasil. Que já teve uma época que meu pai me disse que um escravo valia o preço de 16 bois.
A manutenção do escravismo XIX, sem dúvida, vai permitir. Quanto mais o café ganhava espaço comercial, mais se fazia necessário trazer escravos.
Até nas próprias cantigas, nos próprios lamentos, que já vem de muitos anos, se fala muito nisso. O café vermelho da cor do sangue do negro e preto pela cor do negro que deu toda essa riqueza para o seu patrão, né?
By 1816, there are over 1.5 million slaves in Brazil, a third of the population. More than half are working on coffee plantations.
O trabalho dos escravos, eles acordavam quando o dia estava amanhecendo ainda, trabalhavam o dia inteiro e só voltavam mesmo para a senzala e só quando estava anoitecendo, né? Era horas a fio de trabalho, com direito a comer uma vez só e trabalhava, o trabalho era muito pesado, muito pesado.
Forma a relação, digamos, senhorial, esses homens que se enriquecem com o café, dessas elites de que eu falei, que se enriquecem no café no século XIX. E no período imperial vão estar obtendo do imperador títulos de nobiliarquia, né? São chamados barões do café.
The plantation owners developed these gigantic fazendas with baronial houses, servants. They developed an incredibly privileged lifestyle. They were their own sort of mini government, and they were the dictator.
E havia um sistema de controle bastante rígido, como se pode ver ainda pelo que restam de senzalas, de aparelhos de tortura nesse período.
Os barões do café, eles só tinham olhar numa direção. Era a mão de obra do negro de graça, que não precisava pagar nada. O preço, a qualquer preço eles queriam se enriquecer. Então, para eles não existia mais nada a não ser a riqueza, a não ser o dinheiro do café, né, que era o ouro da época, o café. Então, para eles, o que interessava era isso, o resto era o resto.
Their pockets brimming with golden beans, the coffee barons hold on to their slaves as long as they can, making Brazil the last nation in the Americas to abolish slavery. But they keep their grip on the market for coffee, which is quickly becoming a staple of American life.
Green grass for my pole.